I think probably the best way of answering that question is actually not to look at VMware's perspective, but actually look at the perspective of most of our customers. The great news, I think, as you're alluding to, is that we've been able to have tremendous impact over the last 5-10 years, certainly over the 7 years I've been at VMware, on customers' environments. We've been able to help customers reduce cost tremendously, as well as reduce the complexity of running and deploying servers in their environment. However, the reality is that running IT continues to be expensive and complex. As much impact as we've had, there is tremendously more opportunity for that. We still find that in most customer situations, it takes weeks rather than minutes to deploy resources towards a new business need. We find that when something goes wrong, it is difficult and challenging to understand why something went wrong and then be able to fix it, whether it be scaling the application or fixing the connection. Simply adding capacity can be quite complex. Our belief is that we need greater automation in the data center, that is the only way that we're going to be able to deliver the type of impact that customers really need and deserve in their environment. And so for us, our approach is and has always been threefold. The first one is we believe that to get to automation, you need to be able to have a pool of abstracted resources. The more you're able to abstract resources from physical, the more that you're able to actually automate them. And so thus far we've done CPU and memory. Now the next level is beyond simply just virtualizing everything in the data center from an application standpoint. The other part is tackling networking and tackling storage. Software was embedded in a lot of different hardware devices. And so for almost any service you wanted, you would deploy a new piece of hardware. And so people joke about the pizza boxes. Whatever you want, Apple talks about there's an app for that in the data center. Whatever service you want, there's a pizza box for that. There's an appliance for that. However, the challenge is you've got this software, specialized software, running in every single array, running in every switch, in every router, in every firewall, in every server. And the problem is that becomes very difficult to manage. You have to have an army of people that is well trained on each one of those devices, and when you need to scale, for example, I need to replicate and think about connecting and reconnecting all of these devices. The software-defined data center is about abstracting up away from the physical hardware to be able to have a logical control point. I want to think about a world where as my needs change, I don't have to tinker with hardware that is running software. I want to be able to make a change at a logical software layer and have it immediately impact the environment. There are certainly strong interests in public clouds, and we see all of our customers looking at the public cloud. At the same time, we're not seeing people en masse abandon the infrastructure that they've invested. I don't think it's necessarily that they love hardware or they love managing hardware, is that there is a level of control that is very important that exists right now. If you have your hardware in your own data center, you're able to stand up, as you're being asked now in many environments, to saying, I know who has touched that piece of hardware. I know that nobody else has. I know that I have full control over it, as well as I understand everything that's running on it, and so I'm able to sign my name to saying we're not going to have downtime, we're not going to have a compliance challenge. Also, by having all of the hardware physically sitting next to each other, we're able to ensure that the speed all these devices are sharing information is there. At the same time, as you bring up, one of the challenges of having my own hardware is not only do I have to build and maintain it, but as I scale it, there are some limits to my ability to scale it based on how many internal resources that I have. So increasingly, people are looking outside of the data center to be able to gain tremendous flexibility, especially, whether that be co-located facilities in other data centers or the public cloud. Our belief is that there will be more and more of that. But inherently what people are looking at is not to fully outsource their IT, but in fact to leverage resources where they most make sense. We believe the world is moving towards a hybrid model, certainly, and maybe eventually in 50 years it'll all go over to the public cloud. But short term, be able to leverage the best of all the different models that exist out in the world. It is important to recognize that at the heart of software-defined networking is a recognition that the existing model of networking has tremendous limitations. And as we see a huge expansion in the amount of IT in our organization as we move toward things like the Internet of Things, we recognize that we need to overcome that. And the current model probably has to change. And almost everybody in the space, from VMware to startups to large existing network players, has some slightly different views about how that goes. From VMware's perspective, really the part that we're super interested in is something called network virtualization. It's the ability to create a logical network where you would make changes to the logical network up as an abstracted concept. That rather than down at touching all of the physical switches. It is about the automation, but also about being able to have greater flexibility on the networking side. The Nicera acquisition, as you point out, was a critical part of getting both the technology, but also the leading thinkers in the space, especially Martin Casado. And for us, again, I would say we're quite early. We've announced really the first major product bringing together existing VMware technology and existing Nicera technology. Really what you're seeing now is a lot of these, what we call design wins. This is a completely new architecture. You're seeing the first real customers over about the last year who've implemented this new model, but there is certainly going to be a lot of continued investment in innovation. You should really stay tuned as we start to see this permeate deeper into the VMware customer base. When people talk about open source and open standards, sometimes they're talking about two different things. There's a quote that I really love out there. I think somebody said, when we talk about the free in open source, everybody loves free. Are we really talking about free as in free beer or free as in free speech? What you find out is, especially in the enterprise, it's the latter that is far more important than the former. It's not that people want to say, hey, I don't want to pay anybody any money for improvements in networking. We know there's a lot of cost and complexity there. What people are really looking for is the ability to deploy a networking solution that works with the existing investments that they have. So maybe they were a Cisco shop, but maybe they weren't. Maybe they were a Juniper shop. And one of the immediate questions is, how can I get the benefit from a more abstracted, from a more virtualized network without being beholden necessarily to any one vendor or any one model? This is something VMware's been very much a supporter, I would say, of open standards, as well as in terms of having an entire ecosystem out there. And this is as true in the networking space as it's been. If anything, it might be even broader in the networking space. So certainly we have been one of the top contributors, in fact, in the OpenStack product. Nicera was. And rather, people thought that we would shut that down when we bought Nicera. What we've actually done is we've increased that support in OpenStack. We fully support OpenStandard. We contribute to OpenStandard because at its heart is about solving a real customer problem. That's what we're all about at VMware. You need to be able to interact with all the hardware. Hardware doesn't go away when you go to SDN. Hardware is still going to be around. So certainly we have a very close relationship with most of the major hardware vendors, including Cisco. Certainly, as everybody has an SDN vision, there are times in which our visions may overlap somewhat. We find ourselves in a situation where we're very close friends with a number of players. We have tremendous complementary technology, and we may have a little bit of overlapping technology. And so that is going to continue. And you see in our announcement the number, people are always surprised about this. They read something and go, XYZ player is a competitor. Well, actually, they stand up on stage and say, we're fully supporting VMware NSX, for example. And so you're going to see a wide range of industry players aligning behind our platform. The other piece, which you'll see in a lot of those announcements, is the other side, which is a lot of these hardware players aren't really hardware players. They make money from designing great software, which has lived on hardware because that's the only place it could live for many years. As I give examples that I will give is if you're a firewall vendor, fundamentally what you do is that you develop really good logic to understand what packets can flow to their destinations and what packets don't. There's no reason why that must live in hardware. And so one of the things that we're working with a number of players like F5, if you have a load balancer or you have a firewall out there, there's no reason why you cannot deploy that as a virtual appliance. It is simply a virtual machine that runs on the environment. And so we've been investing tremendously in open APIs to allow all these vendors to plug in to this system and to allow them to continue monetizing the great technology that they're coming out with in a way that's a lot more flexible and easier to administer by customers. I will start by saying I think they're all very important areas. Obviously, if we look at the software-defined data center, as I began this interview, we think that data centers today are far too complex and cost too much money. There's an opportunity to simplify via greater automation. This requires us to abstract more and more. And so software-defined data center, it is our birthright. It is a logical extension to our virtualization technology. At the same time, you touched on this well, there's a whole set of folks who are saying, look, I want to extend beyond my own resources into the public cloud. It is, again, a logical and necessary extension of what we've been doing to be able to support in that. We have for a long time been supporting service providers in building public clouds based on VMware technology, and we are now investing in having a VMware branded run alternative, again, at times with partners of ours, to be able to fill that demand. I don't view those as mutually exclusive. In many ways, as we invest in better technology in the software-defined data center, it supports the VMware, the vCloud hybrid service, VCHS, which is that piece. So they're highly complementary and go together. Interestingly enough, if you look at our end-user computing division, it really has come up around a transformation in the way that people are using devices. One of the first cases is something called VDI, Virtual Desktop Infrastructure. What's interesting here again is it also leverages, it is a use case of our core virtualization technology. And so as an extension of that, it makes sense for us to continue to invest in that business. Increasingly, however, it is not just the desktop that matters. People are moving beyond thinking about a device-specific world. What we've seen is that people think about, how do I access files? How do I log into the services that I need? How do I access SaaS? And so you see the end-user computing has come from an insight that we're moving away from just managing a simple device. It's really about managing an individual. So I really see these as extensions of each other. We're going to continue to invest in all three, and frankly, I'm quite bullish around all three areas.